Welcome back to Sail Hub. Today we've got an absolutely awesome tour coming up. This is basically the Formula One of sailing boats. This is the Gentoo IMOCA 60, which is around the world as fast as you like monohull. It's mental. James Harayda is going to take us around. He's an offshore skipper. He's sailing this thing single-handed. He's going to take us through the ins and outs, what's going on, and how this boat works. But not only that, we get to look at what we can steal from this for our own boat build too. These things are mental. James is basically a lunatic. Let's go and find out what's going on. James, mate.
Hello, welcome on board.
Thanks, man. Thanks so much for having us.
Hey, you're very welcome.
Right, take me around this beauty. She's an absolute monster.
Alrighty, so this is Gentoo. It's a IMOCA class sailing yacht. So it's basically designed for single-handed and short-handed ocean racing. So the shortest race we'll do as part of the IMOCA series is the Fastnet race, so it's about 700 miles.
The Fastnet, the iconic Fastnet, the one everyone's like building up to. Is like the shortest one we do is the Fastnet.
And then the longest one is, of course, the Vendee Globe. So that's 25,000 miles around the world.
25,000 miles around the world. How long is that going to take you then?
On this boat, it should be 85, 90 days. But it's the Vendee Globe, and so anything can happen.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Absolutely brilliant. So tell me a little bit about this boat and what makes this boat special to you.
Okay, so this boat was actually originally built in 2007. It was designed for another British sailor, Alex Thompson.
Yeah.
So it's the second Hugo Boss boat. It's actually the boat that Alex did the Keel walk on back in the day.
Is this the one, is it?
Yeah.
It looks better being blue, eh?
Yeah. Don't tell Alex that. So we've had the boat now for 3 years. So I've done 4 transatlantics on it. 3 of them have been single-handed, so by myself.
Yeah.
And then we've basically every year we do around 4 or 5 races. So I joke that it's my girlfriend at the moment.
Well, I think it kind of is, mate, isn't it? You spent more time sleeping with this, I think. Yeah. Bloody hell. Okay, so how long across the Atlantic?
So this year we've done 2 transatlantics. The race from France to New York took around 11 days, and then the race back was 13. So the good thing, even though it's a pretty uncomfortable boat, is that you get to the finish line quite fast. So
yeah, well, there is that. I mean, that's got to be. So she's cruising at what, 20 or something like that?
Yeah, so we can cruise at 20s, 25s, and then top out at kind of the early 30s, so 32s, 33s.
And with the foils as well. So the foils have changed things a lot, right?
Yeah. So now, so the boat was originally built without the foils, so it had sort of your more traditional dagger boards.
Yeah.
And then now we've got the foils that can be extended out of the boat. So our port foil at the moment is extended. Yeah. And basically they help generate lift. So upwind, they kind of act a little bit like a dagger board, so they help stop us going sideways.
Seal is that leeway.
Exactly. Yeah. And then when we're reaching or going downwind, they're actually producing vertical lift. They kind of have a twofold effect. So not just decreasing the amount of waterline length in the water, so obviously reducing the drag, but also it's helping generate more righting moment. So it's more efficient to generate righting moment through lift than it is through weight.
So when you're extending these foils in and out, is that something that adjustment is changing the way the boat handles, and do you find that it's a bit like something you have to concentrate on and get right, be aware of? Yeah,
these foils, so these are the kind of first generation of foils in the IMOCA class, so they're a little bit more forgiving. Basically, we've got 2 controls, so we've got foil in and out. Yeah. And then we've also got a control. It's on a hydraulic pump, basically, that can adjust how much rake the foil has.
So it's adjusting your lift and your angle of attack.
Yeah.
So if you get that wrong, she's going to want to go the wrong way.
Yes. And
yes.
So we play around a little bit with it. A lot of the time, you're in the sort of maximum lift setting, just to try and lift as much of the bow out the water as possible.
Something else, eh?
Yeah, it's great. It's adds a new dimension to sailing a little bit.
Yeah. Can you talk us through some of the tech that's going on the boat as well?
Yeah, sure. In terms of the technical stuff on board the boat, we've got kind of everything from hardware like the furlers.
So they're carver hull?
Yep. So we've got all carver furlers. Our J2 furler, for example, is structural to the mast of the boat.
When you say structural, you mean?
So basically, if any of that breaks, the rig is going to fall over backwards. So each year we do a lot of maintenance on them.
So there's a lot of stress on that piece of string.
Yeah.
Like mental stress as well.
Mental stress as well. Yeah. So usually when we're sailing, we'll always have up either 2 sails, so that you have another kind of cable up.
Yeah.
Or you'll have a what we call a chicken cable, which is kind of what you can see at the end of the bowsprit at the moment.
So that's just a helper in case.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Everything's run on Dyneema as well, and carbon pins and cross pins and
Yep.
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so we use a lot of Dyneema on board. We've got a partnership with Kingfisher, so they help supply us basically with all of our lines and rigging. And you know, with this type of racing, particularly the sort of ocean racing and longer distance, you know, we're so reliant on kind of how reliable the equipment is on board, and also making sure that we're looking after it. So you know, when you are looking around, everything looks like it's a little bit over-spec'd, which is intentional. So we sacrifice a little bit of weight basically for reliability and safety.
Well, that's it. I mean, the Fastnets itself, that's known for being pretty brutal on boats, but the Vendee Globe, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
You need a little bit in the bag, don't you?
Yeah, you got to nurse the boat around for 90 odd days, and in pretty unforgiving conditions as well. So
cool.
Yeah.
So just looking at what we've got down here, you've again got the carver jammer here running into a friction ring, and there's a 3-to-1 there for your down, basically your downhauling rather than running a 2 to haul up.
Exactly.
That's to prevent twists, right?
Yeah, and so we also, with all of our head sails and actually our mainsail as well, everything's on locks. So unlike a traditional boat where you got kind of clutches, all of our halyards are on locks, and that basically helps with the compression in the mast. And then also it's basically a safety thing as well.
Weight aloft as well, because you're only lifting up with something like this.
Exactly, yeah. We only need very thin halyards.
So when you're doing this sort of locking at the top, you're lifting up on a really thin rope like this.
Yeah.
And you've got minimal thick stay up there and thick rope. And then down at the bottom, because the jam is so close, you've only got 1.5 meters of rope.
Yeah, exactly. And then we've got, so the tack line does extend all the way back, but as a kind of weight saving, but also to save on a little bit of cluster, we've got some of these on board, which is basically a dog bone. And so I can attach that same tack line to our J0 tack as well.
Oh, right. So you're bringing all the tension in your halyards off one rope.
Yeah, exactly.
The downside being is that you need to run forward to do that.
Run forwards, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And this going on here, what's going on with these big channels? Like, imagine these are for sails.
Yeah, so these, basically it's, the deck is a little bit like an aircraft carrier. So it helps in terms of you've got something to always plant your foot against.
Okay.
So you're a little bit more protected.
I've never been on an aircraft carrier, so I wouldn't know. Like.
So you're a little bit more protected. You've got stuff to hold on to, but also some of our lines actually run inside these as well. Again, just to help with the cluster. It's also one of the things is when we're up here, you obviously don't want to lose your footing. And obviously these lines you can kind of roll on pretty easily. Yeah. So it just helps keep some of the lines out of the way.
And so what's behind us here? What's this hatch?
So we've got inside here, this is basically, for lack of a better term, it's our sail locker. So pretty much from here all the way back to the mast is where we'll keep a lot of our sails. Most of the time, particularly when we're actually in the ocean, all the sails will actually come out of this hatch, and then we can stack them on each side of the boat, and we can adjust basically how much righting moment we're producing with all the stack.
So you got water ballast in there as well as that? Or
we do have water ballast. They start a little bit further back.
So now you can just trim with sails.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the weight of a J2, say?
So our largest sails are around 100 kilograms, and then they go down from that, but they're pretty heavy, so I can sort of muscle our 2 lightest ones out of the boat without having halyards. And then for the biggest ones, you're using a halyard. So it's a bit easier when they're on deck because you can sort of slide them around, and you don't need to slow the boat down to get sails in and out.
That's pretty cool, isn't it? Mental. So what's it like being up here in like bad weather? Because you've got these great big sort of channels to hold on to.
Yeah.
The tow rails aren't huge. And to anyone who's used to being on like, I don't know, you go and look around, say, a harbour grassy or this one here.
Yeah.
Oh, we can't go up on deck without a massive handrail. And I'm like looking around this, like one guy by himself in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. What's that like?
It's pretty exposed. So we try and spend as little time up here as we can. The boat does nosedive occasionally as well.
Oh, that's nice.
And so you end up with a few thousand litres of water over the deck. Most of the time, it's not the nice white foamy water either. It's the solid green water. So
that's going to knock you right back.
Yeah, so you feel a little bit like getting hit in the face by a fire hose. So whenever we are forward of the mast, particularly in bad conditions, you're usually quite low. You're holding on to stuff, and then I'm also wearing a harness so I can be clipped onto. We've got our lines here that I can clip onto, but I can also clip onto kind of all these loops.
Do you get any training for that? I mean, do you go to the fire station and get washed down once in a while?
Maybe I should try that.
And what's this?
So here we've got our what we call our backup satellite communication system.
Oh, because you're on Starlink.
Oh, Starlink, yeah. So we've got this a Certus product basically under there, which we can use for sort of basic communication. And then our main communication is actually with the Starlink, which we did some tests on earlier this year, and it's been pretty good so far.
So a bit of interest there. They're actually using, the whole Gentoo team are using the RV Starlink modified to go on this IMOCA, not the offshore one, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
It's nice to see everyone's into tinkering. No tracks on board. What happened to tracks then?
No tracks. So with this system, it actually allows us, you've kind of got an imaginary sort of circle in which this ring, which is our jib lead, can move within, depending on kind of how eased or how much you pull on these control lines.
So you can move this anywhere up and down in that
Exactly,
area.
yeah. And so you can bring, if you're sailing upwind, for example, this is, well, when we're coming in here, we were sailing upwind, so that's kind of our upwind setting.
Yep.
And then as you start reaching, you can bring that ring outboard, up or down. And then if you're reaching wide and you want the jib to be sheeted outboard of the boat, then you've got our outboard.
So you have to literally take the sheet off and put it through there?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And actually, just before we do keep going back, here's the locking mechanism. So
nice.
All of our sails go up and down on these locks. And you can see how thin the halyard is. I mean, you'd expect to see something that thin on a 30-foot boat, not a 60.
Absolutely,
boat.
yeah. Because it's a massive mast as well, eh?
Yeah, 29 meters high.
The sail area on this?
So when we've got up our biggest Jenica, our J3, which we use as staysail, and then full main, it's around 600 square meters, so nearly 2.5 tennis courts.
And that's being held up by a plastic rig?
Yeah, so these are all carbon.
2.5 tennis courts on a carbon rig.
Yeah.
It's a lot, isn't it?
It looks like it as well when you stand there and look up.
Yeah, it's mental, isn't it? It's crazy.
And so with the, as we were talking about earlier, with the lift generated by the foils, you obviously got the heavy canting keel that we can swing 40 degrees.
Yeah.
And then also the shape of the hull, plus the water ballast tanks.
Yeah.
It does allow you to be able to hold quite big sails, so it's quite windy.
Yeah. And the sails you're using really interesting. The green sails from One Sails, that's a super interesting thing, I think, because being able to, these are sails that you can recycle, so super.
Yeah, so it's pretty new technology. One Sails is, I believe, the only manufacturer that's doing this at the moment. So basically, at the end of the life cycle of these sails, we can strip off all of the kind of hardware components to it, and then you could, if you wanted to, effectively lob it into a recycling bin. Because sails are, we as a team, we try and keep our waste down to sort of the absolute minimum.
I mean, it's really important for, especially high-end racing. That's kind of influencing loads of people.
Yeah.
I think it's really important.
Yeah.
And we were chatting to Wilf, who's the man from One Sails, who's sort of come up with this and made it a reality. And it's really cool that he's looking at bringing that eventually down into the cruising world as soon as he can, I would imagine. But there's a lot of research and development needs to happen to do that. It's kind of cool to see all this stuff coming from kind of the Formula One of sailing, if you like, down to kind of average Joe.
Oh, it's brilliant, yeah.
It's cool, man.
Yeah.
Right, so let's go back. I want to go and have a look inside.
Absolutely.
Oh, backstage. What's going on with backstage?
Yes, so we've got a runner on each side of the boat.
Yep.
They obviously are fixed down into each kind of corner.
So these are lashed together into the backstay and the runner together?
Yep, so we've got a kind of a fractional one, effectively, which goes a little bit lower than the masthead one.
Yeah.
And basically these are controlled by the winches in the cockpit, and they can get up to several tons of load, and it basically will help bend the mast back, helps flatten off the sail.
Yeah.
And also in big conditions, you're trying to keep that mast bent that way. Obviously, if it goes the other way, it's
pose a bit of interest when you're tacking single-handed on something where you've got to think about water ballast, the canting keel, the main sheet track positions, hydro generators. I don't know what else you've got to think about. Big flat top main as well, so now you're also thinking about, hang on, we've got ease one and tension one before we can do anything.
It's quite a lot going on.
Yeah, I mean, when you're sort of deprived of sleep for, the average 7 or 8 days, 12 days, 14 days.
Yeah,
that can't be easy.
On these types of boats, especially when you're sailing by yourself, if you do get yourself into an issue, it can take a long time, or it's very expensive to get yourself out of the issue. So we do have inside the cockpit like some checklists basically for each maneuver, so a jibe or a tack.
I mean, that sounds really simple, but when you're knackered, it's like the simple things you forget, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you must spend a lot of time knackered.
Yeah. Cool. So
arguing with your girlfriend.
Yeah. Okay, so welcome into the cockpit. This is basically where I'll spend most of my time on board. And this is, the boat's obviously configured for single-handed or short-handed sailing.
Yeah.
So most of the lines and controls all get fed into this area here. It's quite a big cockpit, but when you've got more than the kind of 2 or 3 people on board, it feels a little bit like you got a few chefs in the kitchen. And
well, I presume these boats are built for one man for the Vendee Globe and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So basically all of the lines, they get put onto these winches here. So these two furthest back ones are for our runners, which is what we were talking about earlier. These are what we call our primaries. So this is what our jib sheets or spinnaker sheets will get fed onto.
Yeah.
And then we've obviously got the pit winch there as well, which is mostly, its role really is to get sails up and down, and then tack lines kind of on, and then also of course furling.
So these are Harken, are they?
Yep, these are all Harken.
Oh, okay. It's amazing to see again the technology running down to the reflex winches, which you see on even your Bavarian.
Yeah, absolutely. So this pedestal is how we get kind of sails up and down. It allows you to generate a lot more load. Basically, if you can get your entire body weight over the pedestal, rather than using something more traditional like a winch handle, we can link this pedestal into these 3 winches here. We can't do it into the runners. So runners is done by a top handle, basically. Yeah. These winches, they all have 6 gears. So basically, depending on which way this button is pushed and which way you're grinding on the pedestal, that's our fastest gear.
Yeah.
That's our second fastest.
Yeah.
And then back the other way, third, and then back into black, fourth.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's often a little bit of a dance with your elbows, kind of popping these buttons different directions and changing direction with the handles as well.
I can imagine that's fun.
Yeah. Then forward, so again, this is our pit. So all of our halyards, the controls for our foils, they come out of here. All of our furling lines, they're out of here as well.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the kind of heart of the boat, where we do all of our sail changes through.
Yeah.
Like I said, most of the stuff gets brought into here. The only time you really need to go up on deck is to do sort of sail changes, reefing, and then quite often you'll do sort of what we call a deck walk. So usually just before it becomes nighttime, you'll do a walk up on deck, make
check
sure
over everything.
Yeah.
So quite cool. Everything's running on textile clutches. So they are like a couple of sort of normal kind of cam clutches, but in general textile, which is all again released back here.
Exactly. Yeah. So one of the
sheet loads are massive, right?
Yeah. So one of the big things that we try and keep under control is sort of the wear and tear on a lot of the lines.
Yeah.
And so having what we call the constrictors is a really nice way. Basically, you'll load up the line over a distance, as opposed to kind of point loading it on a traditional jammer.
So the jammer that you're using at the front, the carver jammer, that works on like 3 collets.
Exactly. Yeah.
Grabbing the rope in 3 ways instead of just squashing it like a traditional one. So again, looking after those ropes, eh?
Exactly. Up here. So we've got all of our displays. So on board, we run...
What time is it?
Hammer time, always. So we run 2 completely separate systems on board. So we have our primary, which is our NKE1, and then our secondary, which is the NKE2 system.
So are these linked into the same NMEA system, or is that completely independent?
These are completely independent.
So 2 NMEA systems running into the boat.
Exactly, yeah.
That's smart.
And so 2 separate, wind sensors on the top of the mast. We've got basically 2 autopilot computers. We've got everything is totally separate.
So
that if one did go down, you've got a full backup. These displays, you can kind of flick through the pages depending on kind of what information you want at any given time. You can see here at the moment we've got sort of our keel cant angle. So at the moment the keel's 15 degrees to starboard. You've got our heel angle 2 degrees to starboard, and then our foil rake as well. To actually control the foil rake, we've got a hydraulic pump down there, which is done by hand. And so we can bring our foils. We've got 5 degrees of play in the rake, so we can bring it from 1 degree up to about 6 degrees to generate more or less lift.
And these are fantastic on juice as well. They don't use much power, these NKE things, eh?
Yeah, they're very efficient.
So power-wise, how are you running power on the boat?
So we've got 3 lithium-ion batteries on board, and then in order to charge those batteries, we've got obviously the hydro generators that we can swing down over the back of the boat, and then we've got the diesel engine as well. Of course, when we're racing, we're not allowed to have it in gear, so they come on board and they'll put a seal around the prop shaft. But yeah, we sort of, depending on the conditions, how fast the boat is going and heel angle, we can use the different methods to charge. We are obviously also looking at kind of solar power as well. It's becoming more and more efficient. And,
absolutely, yeah. So okay. So when you say batteries, what size are these batteries?
So they're 50 amp hour each.
Okay, so they're really quite small.
So in total we've got 150.
On a 12 volt system, is it?
24.
24, then. Okay, so it's a bit bigger.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I guess last thing up here has got to be, right? You've got a tiller there.
Yep.
What's you like to sail under tiller, and how often do you actually do it?
So I actually hand drive fairly little. Well,
there's not really much reason. Autopilots are amazing these days.
Exactly, and also as just human beings, naturally we get distracted, you get tired, you need to eat, you need to sleep. So once you get the autopilot set up, the pilot's very, very efficient, and a human can drive faster than it for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
And then the pilot will kind of overtake. What I do usually is after sort of a sail change or a maneuver, I'll often drive for, it might even be 30 seconds to a couple minutes, just to feel it, and then I can understand kind of how I want the autopilot to drive.
Well, that's it, especially coming from a race car background and the likes, feeling the boat or feeling anything that you're driving makes a big difference, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Completely. So you want to feel them vibrations and the things that you don't necessarily feel unless you're holding it, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, and in sailing, I mean, it's such a dynamic sport where you've got so many different loads and different kind of forces acting on the boat at any given time that there is always that sort of human element of feel that you need to get right. A little bit like sailing a dinghy, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I see that 100%. That's cool. Yeah. All right.
Cool. Should we head down below?
We're getting there, mate.
Welcome to my office.
Welcome to my office. You've got a nice couch. I'll give you that. I'm going to have a go at this. This is like, you only go to the arcades.
Yeah.
And you get like the simulator. When
Just need some hydraulics to make the boat vibrate.
Well, I imagine you don't need much of that when you get going.
So that seat basically is where I'll do all of my sort of navigation, weather, routing. I've got, see Al, the little stuffed animal penguin up here.
He's lovely, yeah.
He does my fact checking for me.
Okay, that's nice.
You're really tired when he starts talking back to you. So we run it's a software called Expedition, which basically can help. Well, it does all sorts of things, including kind of giving you, if you've got a forecast and the performance data of the boat, it'll help give you kind of an idea of the fastest way from getting from A to B.
Yeah.
The kind of trick is to understand why it's telling you to do something. So it might be in order to benefit from a shift or a tidal gain, for example.
Right, okay.
And then sort of understand that and then sort of make your own conclusions and plan. Obviously, it doesn't help you as such with sort of the boat-on-boat strategy. So you need to do that yourself.
You need to be aware of what they're thinking, what they do. And so you've got all your polars in here as well, so what sails to use where.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's telling you what's going on, but that sounds simple, obviously, but the reality is that it's a case of figuring out, and look, that's probably giving you what's happening now, is it?
Yeah.
So you have to forecast that yourself.
Exactly, yeah. And also in different kind of sea states as well, we'd be using different sails.
Yeah.
And obviously it depends a little bit on how gusty it is and things like that.
So how long does it take you to do a sail change on something like this?
Depends on the sail change. If it's a jib change, for example, it can just be a few minutes. If it's a changing down from a big spinnaker down to a slightly smaller one, or doing a mark rounding, so you've got a spinnaker up and then you're sort of dropping that and then coming upwind, that can take an hour of preparation sort of thing. So you've got to be always a step ahead sort of. It's a little bit like a big chess game.
Absolutely. So you've got radar here through a B&G system.
Yeah.
And you've got your two independent things running the same as them ones here.
Exactly.
Kind of repeating, yeah?
Yep. So you've got on the right hand side, we've got our sort of primary system that I was talking to you about earlier.
Yeah.
And then on the left, we've got our secondary one.
Cool.
So they operate completely independently of one another. And then actually in the middle there, you've got those keel control buttons that we had on deck as well. So basically down here is sort of a mirror of what's happening in the cockpit.
Big Brother's watching.
Yeah.
Is that just to make sure you don't go insane? It's like a spacecraft kind of thing, isn't it?
Get told off if I sleep too long.
Go on then, what's the red light for? This one here.
So when we do the man overboard, so if I put a man overboard button, that'll stop pinging off.
That's quite handy when you're by yourself.
Yeah. Try not to fall overboard when you're by yourself. It usually doesn't end very well.
I mean, general daily life, to most people, this would be a disaster, but I mean, I'm totally intrigued. I love this. I mean, getting around here can't be easy because you've got like foot-deep stringers and ribs in here.
Yeah.
Which, have got to pose a bit of a danger once in a while.
Yeah. So I've got little like foam shin pads basically in my foul weather gear.
Okay, that makes sense.
But what you find as well is as the season goes on, you sort of get muscle memory a little bit, and so you remember sort of where things are to watch your head on, to watch your shins on. But yeah, we do, and the motion of the boat can get quite violent. So when you are down below, you're usually quite low. You're holding on to things. You very rarely find yourself sort of stood up and everything. Just the other side of it is that you don't have a doctor on board. So part of it is not just looking after the boat and sailing fast, but actually looking after yourself. Because if you do have an issue, you're the only one that can sort of help yourself.
Absolutely, yeah.
So,
You don't want to be stitching yourself off too much, eh?
No.
It's not ideal. So cooking, tell me about eating and drinking and...
Yeah, so for cooking, which works quite well for me because I'm not the biggest chef in the world. I've got a jet boil, which is pretty simple. So I will fill up this with water, which we generate from our water maker just in here on a little gimbal. And then we can boil water. It only takes a couple minutes. And then we've got these delicious meals, real Termat. It comes from a company called Basecamp Food. And it's pretty simple. Rip the top off of there, fill it up with water, stir it around and leave it for 5 or 10 minutes. Yeah, it can be a bit of a challenge, and actually you find that, you know, if the conditions are bad, you can't even boil water. It's yeah, I'm not joking here, it's probably one of the more dangerous things on board the boat.
Well, it has to be. Like a blatant science experiment, haven't you?
It is.
And how is it literally, I mean, be honest, how is it eating this stuff for how many days in a row?
Weeks and weeks.
I mean, I know it says full meal, and I find that hard to believe because you've got to punch some calories as well.
Yeah, I try and provision off about 4,500 to 5,000 calories a day, depending on kind of the conditions of the race and where the race is.
So that's similar to like a heavyweight boxer or something, eh?
Probably, yeah. And actually, in the last transatlantic, it took 13 days, and I lost nearly 8 kilograms over that period. So we joke that it's the world's most expensive diet to go on.
Cool. So you've got tech down here as well. You've got your ballast tanks, and you've got obviously you're filling them with scoops and the likes. Okay.
So it's a network of pipes down below. On each side of the boat, we've got 2,000 liters of ballast. That's separated into 4 different tanks. So it comes from here all the way back to the back of the boat, and then we've got 2 central tanks at the back of the boat as well.
So where's the aft cabin and the 4-poster bed then?
Still coming, maybe next year. We need to carry a bunk for the rules, so we do have one on board, but unless it's pretty flat conditions, you can get thrown out of it quite fast. So I tend not to sleep, and it's mostly used as a stacking shelf, basically.
The bunk that we don't use.
Yeah.
Yeah, living the dream there, mate. Living someone's dream, someone's nightmare, I reckon.
Yeah.
Bloody hell. Wow. Well, look, and this is your water in here, and then you sail off the head.
Yeah. Yeah, so in here you can see this kind of area of the boat has a lot of structure to it. So this is where the keel is. The keel's just down in there. Like I said earlier, it's a canting keel, so we can swing at 40 degrees.
Yeah.
And that's powered by 2 big hydraulic rams, one on each side, which are just under this cover here. We've also, obviously, above that, got the mast. And then just forward of that, we've got the foil cases, which is where the foils are. Forward of that area is basically a series of watertight bulkheads, so we call it dead space. There's actually nothing up forward.
Yeah.
And that does mean that if you do have a collision with anything, you can sort of sink the front of the boat, and this area, our sort of living cell, will remain dry and the boat will stay on the surface.
Cool.
So.
Very clever. Quite important. All right, cool. Let's just whip outside. I want to have a look at something else.
Absolutely.
Right, James, so I've noticed there's a bunch of like cool numbering things everywhere. All this makes sense for positions and one thing and another. But the question is, what is this?
The fuculator.
Yeah.
The famous fuculator. So basically, we don't have a technical term for it, but basically it's a line that runs forward and then back here, and we effectively tie it onto the lazy runner, so that particularly when you're upwards, disappear off to leeward,
Right.
and you can kind of pull it forward and keep it
it
next to the boat. It stops it from sort of getting tangled around the back of the boom or sail battens, and yeah, just
doing what the beginning of the word says. So it's obviously a French word. I get that 100%.
Yeah.
Okay. All right,
And if you don't let it off, then it fucks you up a little bit later on. So.
So James and the Gentoo guys are looking at having a Vendee Globe campaign, which is pretty cool, eh? And I think these guys have got something special going on here, definitely. And the whole team seems like completely pitched towards one thing and one thing only, which is going fast and doing it well, and also thinking about the environment at the same time. I love that. And if anyone else is behind that sort of thing, or you want to support a bit of IMOCA racing, do get in touch with these guys. We'll leave the descriptions and all of the bump in the bottom of the description in the video. Look them up and have a chat. Help these guys get around the world faster than anyone.
That's the aim.
Right, cheers, man.
Thank you very much for coming on board.
It's been a real pleasure. Cheers, man.